My name is Terry Hatmaker. I'm with CDM Plus. I have Chris Widener with me from our marketing department. He's co-hosting this. So let's get started today. And what we're going to do is, first of all, we are going to talk about a number of things. The first thing that we'll talk about today is the forms requirements. Then we'll go over and look in CDM Plus about some items that you should review prior to printing your 1099s, as well as I'll show you a report that you can use to help you do your review when you print out your 1099s or when you're going through the verification process of your 1099s. So the first thing I want to do is let you know that red forms are required when you're printing 1099s, okay? You'll need the reg forms for the federal and for the W-3. Now you can go to our website at www.cdmplus.com and go to current users and come down to order checks and tax forms. And you'll see a page here. This shows our partner, Dynamic Systems, and they are our partner for different types of forms. Specifically, a lot of them are tax forms. So if you click on this link, it'll take you to a page where you can, in their Dynamic System website, where you can click Shop Now. And under Shop Now, you'll see year-end tax forms, as well as other items here, like checks and so forth. So I can click on year-end tax forms, and you see that you have the W-2 perforated forms. If you want to use those, you don't have to. And if for 1099s, here are the red forms. And you can see you have the 1099 miscellaneous copy A, federal copy, and then you have your 1096 copy. So you can order these, give you an idea that you can order quantities beginning of 50 if you need them, okay? So that is one of the things that you definitely need to make sure you purchase. If you don't want to purchase them through Dynamic Systems, you can purchase them at Office Depot, Office Max, Staples, any of the places that sell the 1099 forms. Now, let's move to our review of items within CDM Plus. There are a few things that we want to look at, and the first area we want to go to is our payer records under accounting. So we go to Program, Accounting, Payer Records. Click all, and here you see that I have one payer record. If you don't have a payer record identified for accounting, when you go to print your 1099s, you're not going to see anything show up. And so in the 1099 form window, actually it's the CDM Plus report form window for 1099s. But so you want to have at least one. You may have situations where you need more than one, and we'll talk about what you need to do with that with respect to this as well. Let's look at the detail of items down below and the things that you need to be cognizant of before you go and print your 1099s. All right, so we're going to look at the detail down in the bottom portion of the window since we have this one selected. Above this red line, you see a description and a federal ID number. You want to make sure your federal ID number is correct. Over to the left of that, you have description, and this field is important when you are going to have more than one payer. If, for instance, you have a nursery and both are going to be under different federal ID numbers, and so you'll need to do 1099s for the church and the nursery, you would have a second payer that would be designated like FCC nursery. Now, down below the red line, you have company and contact information as well as state. The items that have asterisks here, you want to ensure that you have every one of those fields filled out and properly filled out at that. And so you can come in here, make any changes you want, and those changes will be exported out to Atrix. Over to the right, you have states. And here you can list as many states as you need, as many states that you would be reporting. All you do is click on the state, but you want to make sure you have the state and the correct tax ID number for that state. When you feel confident with this information, you can save your work. And we will now move to look at vendor records. So we go to payables and vendor records. And I've done a search here automatically for the vendors here that have 1099 miscellaneous selected. When you are setting up a vendor and that vendor is going to be a 1099 vendor, what you want to ensure is that you enter in their recipient ID or social security number and that you mark 1099 miscellaneous here so that CDM Plus will know that this is a 1099 miscellaneous vendor. What this does is that when you make a payment and you post it, CDM Plus is going to put a check in the ledger entry for a 1099 payment. As you see in this case here, you have a 1099 check mark right here for this item, okay? And what that does is when CDM Plus goes to export the different vendor payments, it will look for only those items that have a 1099 mark. And it will export that information so that you're not bringing over debit payment information that's not associated with a 1099 miscellaneous form. So let's go back to vendor records. So you want to make sure that that's set. If that hasn't been set up to this point, then you'll have to go in and you're going to have to mark the payments manually as being 1099. And I'll show you how you do that here in a second. Now, another thing you would do when you set your 1099 vendor up, you would go and select the 1099 Setup tab and make sure you have box 7 selected so that the compensation payments that you've made will go into the proper box of your 1099s. With those two things set up, then your vendor would be ready to be able to write payments to, and now it's also ready to be able to print your 1099s. But the way to really ensure if that's true is we need to go over to the Payments tab here. Now, if I pull up a payment for like this one payment here for $500, okay, we see that we have 2 line items, one for labor and one for parts. The one for labor is marked as a 1099, and how I know is because there is an asterisk beside the account number. If this parts item was a 1099 item, then all you would have to do is select that and then click toggle here, and now I can see that it's been marked as a 1099 payment. However, parts is not included in the 1099 for this vendor, and so we want to make sure that that is not marked as a 1099. You'll need to go through and possibly mark a bunch of these as 1099. Now, remember I said that if you had set up a vendor and paid them throughout the year and you did not mark that 1099 miscellaneous on their vendor record right here prior to just printing your 1099s, then you'll have to go through all of their payments and you will have to toggle the 1099 payment for each one. Okay, so I would have to come through here, and if they're not marked 1099, like in this case, this one is not marked 1099, okay, I'll have to decide, should these be marked 1099 or not? Okay, just remember, these are associated with ledger entries, okay? So if I come back down to this one, this is a ledger entry. In fact, it's this entry that we're looking at right here, okay? And see, we have a check number of 2060, and there it's verified that that's the same. So that's a very important step for you to take. Now, one of the ways that you can determine if you have a problem with a specific vendor is by running a report. And you can go to reports, and go down to ledger reports, go to activity, and select ledger by vendor. This report allows you to print out by vendor the total amount of payments that have been made to them, and you can specify it to be 1099 only. So in this particular case, I'm setting up for the year 2019, and I want all accounts selected. I'll go to reports, and I'll select all the vendors. And under the 1099 option, I'm going to put a check besides 1099 items only. So what this is going to do, it's going to pull all the ledger entries that have that checkbox checked for 1099, and it will only print out those vendors that meet that criteria. Okay, right now I've got it set for composite. Let me go back over here and select detail. I'm going to sort by reference number. I could do it by transaction date or check number, whichever one. I'll leave it at reference, and let's hit refresh. And now we see our printout. In the detail mode, you'll see each individual payment that you made to the vendor. Okay, so this is a way that you can come down here and you can say, you know, I'm looking at David Wood and $1,300 doesn't seem right. It seems too much, or it seems too little. Well, you can then go into their vendor record under payments and start looking at those payments again in light of what you're looking at here, and determine whether or not those items are properly marked for 1099. Okay? If you feel everything is okay, you notice it could be, you could have a number of payments here that it gets a little bit difficult to see the totals. Well, that's okay. You can come back over to report and select composite, and then click refresh. And now when you refresh it, now you have a composite report here of 5 vendors and their total amounts. One thing I want to bring out is if we go back under vendor records, you remember when I did this search for 1099 form that was marked 1099 miscellaneous, I got 6 results, and I'm only getting 5 results in my vendor report. Is that wrong? Well, if we go to the vendor that is not listed here, which is Mike Curry, we can see that the last payment that was made to Mike was in 2017. Okay, so that's another way where you can cross-reference your information. Okay. Now, with that, we've completed everything that we want to look at in CDM Plus. And so I'm going to close these windows. I'll leave the ledger record window open, and let's go to reports, come down to payables reports, and we'll open 1099 tax forms. If you only have one payer record, it will populate here in the payer dropdown. If you have more, then you have to select. Now we're going to select the proper form, which is 1099 miscellaneous, and we'll enter 2019 for the year. And we're going to limit vendors paid at least $600. Okay. The report that we were looking at with respect to ledger by vendor does not limit that $600. That if you had vendors that you'd only paid $300 to, it would show up on that report. So, you know, it's not just showing your vendors that are going to be having a 1099 printed. But in this case, when we run our 1099s, it's going to look at the total amount of payments you've made and only report those vendors that you paid at least $600 to. Okay. So now we'll click on Show Form. And that opens up the Atrix Forms Viewer. So you get a window here, a little sheet that pops down upon opening. that gives you some information, review and edit, fill out any required field, highlighted in red. Blue fields may be edited, and those kinds of things. You can print records for your copy, and then it says federal copy or state copy, print official federal state copies, and then mail it, or click the e-file button to electronically file your report. That just is a little bit of information here of what you're going to do in this process. So we'll click OK. And if you look at the status window now, it says, are all of your forms ready? Click next stage to continue. If I click next stage here, the first thing it's going to do is going to say, this form has more than one page. You haven't reviewed them yet. Go back and review them. So I'm going to say yes. And so it immediately takes me to the second page. So what you want to do here is take that ledger by vendor report, and you want to go and make sure box 7 for all of these is correct. But that's not the only thing you want to check for. You also want to make sure that your address, the information for your vendors are correct, and so forth. You want to thoroughly check this to ensure that everything is correct. And you want to go through each page. I have 5 vendors, so I'm going to have 3 pages. Okay, and so I'll go through all 3, and I verify that information. And when I do, I click on next step. Then it says, are you done reviewing? Then go ahead and click the next stage. So we're done. And it's going to give one more chance and say, are you sure? You don't want to go back and double check. If I click double check, I can go back and review again. But I'm okay, so I'm going to agree. And it says now, click the process button to print and or e-file your 1099s. So now I'm going to click on process, and I am not going to e-file federal only. I'm going to go and print your own. And so we select that and we click continue. And now it's going to take us through the process of printing our form. Here is the print payer records copy, and this is 4 recipients per page, and this is on plain paper. So we'll print that. And what I'll do is I'll just print this out to preview so you can see. This is the way it will print. And you want to go through and make sure everything looks okay. And I'll lower that. And once you've printed all of those out, you click on next. And now it'll take you to printing your federal copies. This is 2 recipients per page on pre-printed red forms, okay? So if I click print here and I hit open in preview, now you see that it's set up so that the data will fit within the red forms that you've placed in your printer. If you find that it's not lining up the way you really like it to line up, you can adjust that, okay, by going under File. Well, we'll have to get out of this first, I think. Let me cancel this. And if I go to File and click Print Override, Printing Overrides, here you can adjust the horizontal and the vertical distance. So you said you want to read what this says. It says, enter the distance to adjust the horizontal and vertical alignments of the form data to the page. Negative numbers like 0.025 will move the printing left or up. So if I have a horizontal of minus 0.2, I'm moving my margin to the left. If I have a negative vertical, I'm moving my upper margin up. You can work with this. I suggest that you print this out on plain paper and then put it up to the light with your red paper and make sure that it's lining up properly, okay? Now let's go back and continue the process. Okay, so we've already printed that. Now let's go back to and we've already printed our federal copies. So let's go to the next of this. And now we're going to print our state. And this is 4 recipients per page on a plain paper. Okay, so we click on print. And let's open this in preview. And I want everyone to know, you don't have to do this. You don't have to bring it up in preview. I'm doing this so you can see the to see how the report is printing, okay? I've had that question before in another webinar. So that's that. So all you have to do is click on the print button and then click print here and print it out to your printer. I'm just doing this so that you can see it. And so once you have your state copies printed, you print your recipient copies. And this is one recipient per page on plain paper. Again, you would click print. I'm just going to show open preview so you can see it. And so there you go. You can see that this has 4 copies for one vendor here. And so you want to make sure that you've got 5 pages because you have 5 vendors, and we do. And when you've printed that, you click on next, and now is your Social Security notice, and you can print that, and it'll print 5 copies of that, as you can see. And then we click next, and now it comes to the federal 1096. And so this one summarizes 1099s and must be submitted to the SSA with the 1099s. And it must be on the pre-printed 1096 form, which is also red. So we click on print. And if you need to put in contact or email information, you can, or your employee or identification number. I think that should already be there, but let's see. Nope, you're going to have to enter that information in. So before you print that, you'll need to enter this information into your 1096 along with your employer identification number. And when you enter a phone number, you want to make sure you format it in this way, parentheses, and then a space. And then you put in your employee identification number and click continue. And when I click on print, now that information shows up into the 1096. If you do want to open this in preview, you can always print from here, but just, you don't have to do that. All right, so once you're printed your 1096, you click done. And done again, and now you have completed the process of printing your 1099s. That's a quick overview of the 1099 process in CDM Plus and in Atrix. If you have any questions, you can call 1-800-633-9581.